to remind us that there is God and that it's joyful and fulfilling to think of God and to devote everything, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions to God. And Gopal Bhatta Goswami is one of these great personalities, and we want to speak about him today and share some of the results of our research about Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So to start, we would like to sing a song with you. Can I share my screen, dear Govinda?
I think we can arrange it so you can. Yeah. Now you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay. I'll get there.
Okay, we have this also.
Do you see? What do you see?
We see the 6 Goswami sitting.
Okay, yes, okay. That was a different.
Sri Shat Goswami Astaka with a funny type of.
That's what I want you to see. So, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, he's one of the 6 Goswamis, and the Goswamis, they were associates, very close associates of Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, he's an incarnation of God. He's an incarnation of Krishna. And he revived the chanting, the singing of the names of God, what we sang before, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, singing that together. And his instruction is that's how we can, how we wake up and remember God, is by singing his names, his holy names. And the 6 Goswamis were very close associates of Lord Chaitanya, and they left many instructions, recipe books for us, like the ordinary human beings, like recipes we can follow to wake up, remember God, wake up our love for God. And so Gopal Bhatta Goswami, he's one of the 6 Goswamis, and we'll speak more about him. First, we want to sing this beautiful prayer by Srinivas Acharya, who was actually a disciple of Gopal Bhatta Goswami.
If you'd like to start with some like invocation, like Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda, or Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay, we were going to do that before reading Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Sounds good.
Shall we do that now?
Either way.
Anandini?
Yes.
I just want to name one thing. Hi everyone. Is sometimes we use words and like Goswami. So what is a Goswami? What does Goswami actually mean? So I just wanted to name, because I have that question, like what does actually, like I can say words, but what does Goswami mean? So just Goswami in itself as a word, it's it refers to someone who has mastered the senses. So that's just literally what that word means. So when we say Goswami, it means somebody who has mastered the senses. So I just wanted to name that. Thank you. Now I'm ready.
Thanks for that.
Okay, so maybe you have the song in your textbook. If not, it's here on screen. Krishna Kirtana Jnana Bhava Chaitanya Kripabaro Bhuvi Bhuvo Shri
Jiva Gopala Dharma Samstapako Lokanam
Bhuvane Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena
Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Jiva Gopalaka Shri Govanga Gunanubhadana Radha Samadhyan Vido Apotapanikrintano Tanupam Govinda Ganamita
Sankhya Purvakana Magana Nidra Vande Rupa Sanatana Yuga Shri Jiva Gopala Eva Eva Devi Nanda Sunu Kuta Shri Govardhana Kalpataru Kalindivane Kuta Goswami Sarvato Vrajapure Kedai Mahavivaro Vande Rupa Sanatana Yugao Shri Jiva Gopala Hare Krishna, thank you. So this is as a beginning to dive into the moods of the six Goswami and especially Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And to go further, we would like to chant a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. I'll share it on the screen if you want to take the book. It's in Adi Lila, chapter 10, verse 105. Adi Lila, chapter 10, verse 105. We'll share it here. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So we'll recite the verse a few times and then go for translation. So, Shri Gopala Bhatta Ikasaka Sarvotama Rupa Sanatana Sanghe Andra Prema Lapana. Okay, I'll do one line and then we can have repeat and Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Shri Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Rupa Sanatanaya Sanghe Yandra Prema Lapana
Rupa Sanatana Sanghe Yandra Prema Alapana.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Shri Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Rupa Sanatana Sanghe Yandre Prema Alapana
Rupa Sanatana Sanghe Yandra Prema Alapana.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Shri Gopala Bhatta Ekasaka Sarvotama
Rupa Sanatana Sanghe Yandra Prema Alapana
Rupa Sanatana Sangeya Prema Alapana.
Would anyone else like to do something?
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Shri Gopal Bhatta Eka Shakya Sarvatama.
Upasanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alapana.
Upasanatana Sangeya Prema Alapana. Shri Gopal Bhatta Eka Shakya Sarvatama.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Upasanatana Sangeya Prema Alapana.
Upasanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alapana.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Rupa Sanatana Sange Yanre Prema Alapana.
Upasanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alapana.
Shri
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Rupa Sanata Sange Yandre Prema Alapana.
Upasanatana Sange.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Shaka Sarvotama.
What's the beat again? Rupa Sanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alopana.
Upasanatana Sange Yanra Prema Alapana.
Okay, so word for word. Shri Gopal Bhatt.
Shri Gopal Bhatt.
Shri Gopal Bhatt.
Shri Gopal Bhatt.
Eka.
Eka.
One. Shaka.
Shaka.
Branch. Sarva Uttama.
Uttama.
Very exalted.
Very exalted.
Rupa.
Rupa.
Sanatana.
Sanatana.
Sange. Company. Yanra. Whose. Prema. Love of Godhead. Alapana. Discussion. Translation. Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, the 47th branch, was one of the great and exalted branches of the tree. He always engaged in discourses about love of Godhead in the company of Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gyanam Jana Shalakaya Jakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prajarine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyarishatari. So that's my prayer, that whatever I share, we share, is representing the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya, Sri Krishna. So this verse, it's actually one of the very rare places where Gopal Bhatt Goswami is mentioned in Charitamrita. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is a summary of Lord Chaitanya's life and his teachings. And the author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. And Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, he was very old. He could hardly see or walk when he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita. And before starting to write, he went to all the saintly people all the saintly personalities in Vrindavan, all the devotees of Krishna, to get their blessings. And Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami said, I'll give you my blessing, but please don't mention me in the book. And so this says a lot about Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, about his character, his humility. He didn't want to be mentioned. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami agreed that he wouldn't mention him, but he did mention him, like in this verse, for example. So just very briefly about, there's this tree mentioned, the branch. This verse is from a chapter where the analogy of a tree is used to describe how Lord Chaitanya and his message, his mission, his love, his instructions, how they spread throughout the world. And in that analogy, Lord Chaitanya, he is the trunk of the tree. And then there are many branches, and from every branch, there are further branches and further twigs. And so I think altogether there's over 90 branches described. And the first branch, always being a personality, was in association with Lord Chaitanya. And so here we have the 47th branch, which is Rupa Goswami, is Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who was very closely related or in association with Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. And to hear more about who that personality is, who that humble personality is, Syamapriya is going to tell the story.
Thank you, Anandini. So to tell the story, I would like to invite everybody to get comfortable, come into a circle with the image of, well, in Christianity, there's a saying that Jesus said that the kingdom of God is for children. It's the, I can't remember the exact verse, but it's, let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. And by being children, so as we hear the story of Srila Gopal Bhatta, I'm inviting us to connect with a mood of childlike wonder and curiosity of who is this personality that we're going to hear about. We're going to hear about some of his childhood. So the invitation is, yes, just get comfortable and be willing to drop any of the adult mind and let ourselves connect with the childlike wide mind of curiosity. So I'm going to read a story about him, and we'll have time after the story for sharing and questions and more. Thank you, Keith. So Keith wrote, "You must enter into the kingdom of God like unto that of a child." Yes, so that's one of the, thank you, Keith. One of the verses. So Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Birth. He was born in the village of Belagui, which is on the bank of the Kaveri River near Srirangam. While traveling in South India, Lord Chaitanya spent 4 months of the rainy season at the house of Venkata Bhatta, the father of Gopal Bhatta in Srirangam. The temple of Sri Ranga Kshetra was extremely large. The crest of the temple tower pierced the sky. Throughout the day and night, hundreds and thousands of pilgrims were going and coming to take darshan of Lord Raghunath. The temple hall resounded with the sounds of hundreds and thousands of brahmanas chanting Vedic hymns. In the midst of this scene, from Vaikuntha entered Sri Gaurasundar, chanting the names of Krishna in his sweet voice that defeated the voices of 10 million Gandharvas. Everyone in the temple became dumbstruck, amazed and thrilled with wonder. What unprecedented beauty! His bodily effulgence makes molten gold appear lackluster. From his eyes, which are like the full-blown petals of a lotus flower, trickle down tears of ecstatic love. Every limb, every part of his body was filled with such exquisite grace that even the mind of Cupid gets stolen away. The Brahmins began to consider, is this a demigod? Can such symptoms and emotions be found in human beings? Again, resounding the halls with the transcendental vibrations of Sri Hari's name, when he came before the deity and fell down as a tree is blown down by the wind, some people thought that a mountain of gold was rolling on the ground. Sri Venkatabat, seeing this divine personage, became restless with ecstasy. His heart being flooded with devotion, he got up and began to move the crowds away so that the Lord could engage in chanting and dancing. When the Lord had regained his external consciousness after engaging in Sankirtan, Venkatabat approached him and took the dust of his lotus feet. Mahaprabhu gazed towards him and saying, Krishna, Krishna, embraced him firmly. Sri Venkatabat invited Mahaprabhu to come to his house, and having brought him there, very reverently washed his lotus feet, and along with the other family members, he drank the water. Sri Bhatta G house became filled with joy. Venkatabat had two brothers, Tirumala Bhatt and Prabodhananda Saraswati. They all belonged to the Ramunaja Sampradaya, and Prabodhananda Saraswati was a Tridandi sannyasi of that order. Venkatabat had a son named Gopal, who was then just a child. When the boy came to offer his obeisances at the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu, he picked him up and very affectionately seated him in his lap. Mahaprabhu would call Gopal after he had finished his meal and offer his remnants to the boy. In this way, he prepared him for the position of Acharya. After remaining at Venkatabat's house during the 4 months of the rainy season, Mahaprabhu prepared to continue his journey of the south. Venkatabat's house began to ebb in a tide of tears in anticipation of his departure. Gopala fell at his lotus feet in a dead faint. Therefore, Mahaprabhu remained for a couple more days in order to console the boy. Being pleased with Gopala Bhatta Goswami's sincere service and devotion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu initiated him and ordered him to move to Vrindavan after the disappearance of his parents and perform bhajan and rite. He instructed him to serve his mother and father and always engage in chanting Krishna's glory, and thereafter to come to Vrindavan. Very quickly, Gopala became expert in grammar, poetry, and rhetoric, and then began to study his study of Vedanta. His uncle Prabodhananda specifically began to instruct him from the devotional scriptures. Gopala Bhatta always remained thinking of the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu and when he might again be able to meet him. At the same time, however, he couldn't leave his aged mother and father. Finally, having reached their final days, they called their son Gopal and instructed him to go to the lotus feet of Mahaprabhu in Vrindavan. Then, while meditating on his lotus feet themselves, they went to join him in his eternal Leela. At the age of 30, Gopala Bhatta Goswami came to Vrindavan, and having mistreated Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, thus saddened him. Thus Gopala set out for Vrindavan, and when he arrived there, Rupa Goswami immediately sent word to Mahaprabhu to inform him of Gopala's arrival there. Mahaprabhu had previously indicated to Rupa and Sanatana that Gopala Bhatta would one day come there to Vrindavan. So upon his arrival, they treated him with the same care and affection they would their own brother. They immediately became lifelong companions. However, the all-knowing Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, received word that Gopala Bhatta had come to Vrindavan. He was very pleased and sent with that messenger with the Lord's personal wooden sitting plank, hoki, which he had used along with a pair of his undergarments and one of his upper clothes, Utra and Chadar. Having received these gifts, Gopala Bhatta was in ecstasy and he worshipped them as Prasad Tadiya of Mahaprabhu. When he would worship his deities, he would sit on that wooden plank, this piri, wooden seat, and Mahaprabhu's clothes are still being worshipped at Radharama Mandir. Gopal Bhatta, like Rupa and Sanatan, had no fixed residence and would spend the night in various kunjas, forest groves. He spent his time studying the scriptures and composing various literatures. Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami compiled the following books: Hari Bhakti Vilasa, the authorized book explaining the ritual and devotional practices of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. He also wrote Sat Kriya Dipika and the outline for Srila Jiva Goswami's Sat Sandarbhas. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's disappearance, Gopal Bhatta Goswami felt intense separation from the Lord. To relieve his devotee, the Lord instructed Gopal Bhatta in a dream: "If you want my darshan, then make a trip to Nepal." In Nepal, Gopal Bhatta bathed in the famous Kali Gandaki river. Upon dipping his water pot in the river, he was surprised to see several shaligram shilas enter his pot. He dropped the shilas back into the river, but the shilas re-entered his pot when he refilled it again. After emptying and refilling his water pot for the third time, Gopal Bhatta Goswami found 12 shaligram shilas sitting there. Thinking this must be the Lord's mercy, he kept all the shilas and returned to Vrindavan. Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami used to worship 12 shaligram shilas. Wherever he would go, he would bring them with him in a piece of cloth tied at the corner. One day, a wealthy man came to Vrindavan and offered Gopal Bhatta a variety of clothing and ornaments for his shaligrams. Being very impressed with the Goswami, he wanted his darshan and to render some service, which he presented in the form of these valuable clothes and ornaments. However, Gopal Bhatta couldn't use these for his rounded shaped shaligrams, so he advised the donor to give the deity decorations to someone else. But the visitor insisted. Gopal Bhatta kept the clothes and ornaments with his shilas. While Gopal Bhatta Goswami was absorbed in remembering how the half-man, half-lion form of the Supreme Lord had manifested from the pillar in Hiranyakashipu's palace, he prayed in transcendental lamentation to the Lord. "O my Lord, you are very merciful and always fulfill the desires of your devotees. I wish to serve you in your form, having arms and legs and blissful smiling face with lotus eyes. If I had a deity, then I would be able to decorate him so nicely with these clothes and ornaments." In the evening, after offering some bhoga and erotica to his shaligram shilas, Gopal Bhatta put them to rest, covering them with a wicker basket. Late in the night, Gopal Bhatta took a little rest, and then in the early morning went to take a bath in the Yamuna River. Returning from his bath, he uncovered the shaligrams in order to render the puja for them, and saw amongst them a deity of Krishna playing the flute. There were now 11 shilas, and this deity, the Damodar Shila, had manifested as the beautiful threefold bending form of Banga Ananda Krishna. This wonderful event of the appearance day of Radharama happened on the day after Sri Narasimha Chaturdashi, and is celebrated on that day accordingly. That day, they offer 500 liters of milk for the Lord's pleasure and many other sweets and different things. The Radharaman temple has the highest standard of deity worship in all of Raja. Sri Radharaman Ji is the only one of the original deities of Vrindavan who never left to go to Jaipur. Sri Radharaman Ji is still being worshipped in Vrindavan near Nidevan Kunj in the compound of the temple. The deity is called Radharaman, although physically there's no apparent deity of Radha there. Sri Radharaman Deva, unlike other deities, has very intricate features, including fingernails and even teeth. On the back side of his body, parts of the original Shaligram Shila from which he manifested himself can be seen. Some scientists had come to examine the deity and propound their doubts that he was self-manifested as the devotee state. They examined the deity under the supervision of the devotees, but could find no evidence of carving. Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami Ki. Hi. Anandini, would you put up the picture of Sri Radharaman? It's a beautiful picture of the deity. Wanted to share that with you. And so this is the picture of Sri Radharaman.
So I'll just give concept. The land of Krishna is Vrindavan, Uttar Pradesh, India, and Vrindavan. Well, it's not too big, but there's like practically every home is a temple of Krishna, of Radha Krishna. And so the seven main temples, one of the seven main temples was established by Gopal Bhatta Goswami, and this is the deity of Radharama in that temple in Vrindavan.
So right now, Anandini and I would like to invite sharing of, before we move on to anything else. We want to hear from you. How did that story land for you? What jumped out for you? What's moved inside you? Yeah. What's happening for you now?
This is Gajendra. Can I say something quickly?
Yes, please, Gajendra, welcome.
Well, I was delighted, when this came up, because this is just kind of personal, really, because I know that Gopal Bhatta's samadhi is there at the Radharaman temple. And I've always felt a connection to Radharaman, and it was quite unintentional when the names of the Radharamana Hari temple that happens to be located in Alachua, there is a connection between Radharaman here and there. The unique thing is that at the Radharaman Hari temple in Alachua, Srimati Radharani is present. And this is a place where you have to see Radharaman with Radha, actually in Alachua. That's all.
Gajendra. Yes, because in Vrindavan, in the Radharaman temple, so there's only the deity form of Sri Radharaman, but also Srimati Radharani is present, silver crown next to him. So that's representing her, but she's not apparent physically in a deity form. And so you're making the connection also. It's like at the temple, the Radharaman Hari temple in Alachua, Srimati Radharani has a physical form herself. And thank you for sharing, Gajendra.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody else got it, but I figured you'd get it.
Gajendra has a beautiful temple space in Alachua with beautiful deities. So I'm sure if anybody wants to take darshan of his deities, they would be very welcome. And beautiful property. Thank you, Gajendra. Anyone else? Anything else about the story of Srila Gopal Bhatt that spoke to you about the child who was so attached to the Lord that at the thought of his leaving, he fainted in despair, to his dedication to his parents, and when his parents left their bodies, followed the instructions of the Lord and moved to Vrindavan. Yes, his intense desire to serve the Lord. Yeah, anything else? Anybody else?
I found it very sweet that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took the child Gopal on his lap. I found that very sweet. I just thought to give some context about deities. But so that it's described just like we have form. So like the philosophical spiritual principles, janma dyasya yataha. What exists in the effect must be there in the source. So, so there's different conceptions of what is the absolute, what is the ground, what is the substratum of all existence. There's some conceptions like maybe at the foundation of everything, if we really get to the core, there's nothing, nothingness, void. So that's not this Bhakti Yoga conception. And there are conceptions like, okay, at the ground of everything, maybe there's matter, like subatomic particles. It's conceptions like, well, the source of everything is like the undifferentiated spirit, the oneness of spirit. And so, like Syamapriya and Anandini read from this literature, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So these literatures, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this Bhakti Yoga Krishna consciousness, so the tattva, the assertion, is at the ground of everything. If we get to the core, keep peeling off layers, it's not nothing, not matter, not undifferentiated spirit. Actually, at the core of everything is transcendental personhood. It's described. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudev means an all-pervading person. So like we're persons, so our source must be personal. And so this whole Bhakti Yoga, it's about connecting in loving devotion with the soul of our soul, with that supreme person, realizing who we are as not the body, as spirit soul, and connecting with the soul of our soul. And so that connection is described. There's Nama, Rupa, Guna, and Lila. So Nam, like the English word name. That's why so much of our program is about realizing the absolute, realizing God through the name. So that's like the main doorway. That's why we're encouraged as much as possible, chant the names of God. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. And through approaching through the name, then Rupa gets revealed. And Rupa refers to, just like there's transcendental sound, and so there's transcendental form. Like here in our homes, our ashrams, these are not just like there's material sound that will entangle us further in the illusion that we are this body. which is the root cause of all anxiety. And there's spiritual sound. We hear and chant spiritual sound, and we come to real deep peace and fulfillment and freedom from being a slave to the material pushings and pullings of the modes of nature. So similarly, there's spiritual form, and that's what Syamapriya, and so Syamapriya is reading about here, the deities. So again, so of course, like I was not raised with a particularly spiritual upbringing or religious. It was secular Reform Judaism. I had a bar mitzvah. I think I brought in about $5,000 for my bar mitzvah.
That's a lot at the time.
You did that.
Did pretty good.
You did that.
Yeah. So, no, actually, I had, there was some beginning connection with like something sublime, some synagogue, but quite a secular upbringing. But one thing I learned, actually, it's interesting. So in the Bible, in the Old Testament, like the one thing I learned, don't worship idols, right? Don't worship idols. Okay, so then we can say, well, what's all this form? If you look in the synagogue or a mosque, you won't even find a picture of a rabbi or a sheikh, not to speak of a form of God, if that's considered offensive. Right? God, the idea is God has no form. So then, actually, if we look at the Hebrew in the Bible, right in that, in the 10 Commandments, the commandment where it says, don't worship form, the actual Hebrew is al panai. Panam, like Shena Punam. Okay. Panai means face, and al means, actually, what God's actually saying in that commandment is don't worship any face except for mine. Don't worship any form except for mine. So interestingly, the commandment that's come to be known as like God has no form, God's saying, I have a form, and serve that, honor that, respect that, worship that, serve that. And don't worship the golden calf, don't worship money, don't worship this celebrity and that celebrity, so we have a form, so God must have a form. And so we enter into God's form through God's name, Hare Krishna, or any bona fide name of God. And then what we're talking about here is the deity form. And so as we expose ourselves to transcendental forms like Radharama, whether in Alachua or Vrindavan, we expose ourselves to deity forms, then more and more our hearts get purified. So like you might say our cornerstone practice is chanting and hearing the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the same time, in the line of Gopala Goswami, Srila Prabhupada gave us also to serve the deities, to serve transcendental forms. And as we chant the names and serve the forms, then gradually as our heart becomes purified, we open up to receive realization about transcendental quality and transcendental pastime. Hare Krishna. Just thought to give some philosophical context there and theological.
Thank you, Ravinda. Appreciate the elaboration on the form of the deity and all the love areas that you've gone. Anandini, or was there anything you wanted to share?
I think Shamya Pras wants to share
Oh,
something.
I see the hand up. Yes, Syamapriya Das.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo something I think that David was saying. Just an appreciation of Gopala Bhatta Goswami, because he feels like family to me, because I recognize that, he came from the South Indian Vaishnava tradition and then met Lord Chaitanya, and in the South, they were very, very expert at maintaining the standards around deity worship for centuries and millennia. And he was noted for compiling information around that and Vaishnava etiquette also. in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, and then of course Radharama manifested for him. And it's something that I always appreciated that Srila Prabhupada, when he went to Vrindavan with the devotees, of course he was there for many years himself too, but when he went with the ISKCON devotees in the early days, he said we should learn about deity worship and Vaishnava etiquette from the devotees in the Radharaman temple. He noted that they had a very high standard they'd maintained since the time of Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and that's his deity, and those are his descendants in his mood. And Prabhupada felt that there was something we could learn from that. So our own deity worship in ISKCON, which is a remarkable thing, actually, it exists on such a remarkable standard internationally, is really a gift from Gopala Bhatta Goswami, I feel. And it's nice to hear about him in that light. It feels like we're receiving his benediction, his gift from so many generations ago. It's still with us.
Thank you, Syamapriya. Yes, I appreciate your appreciation, how it's moving you, like Srila Gopal Bhatt's, how his teachings, that through how he was worshipping his deities, is coming all the way down, and Srila Prabhupada reinforcing that for us, that the beauty and the humility and the dedication in that form of worship and worshipping the deities and the etiquette of it. You're moved to hear more in that format, and thank you for highlighting that.
Dr. Nico, you had a comment?
Yeah. First, thanks for everyone being here. It's such a blessing to sit in community like this. Kind of to David's story, like I also grew up in like a more secular like childhood. And one of the things, as I started like getting involved in bhakti yoga, one of the really like uncomfortable situations was deity worship. Like, oh, like what are you bowing down to or whatever. But now I'm like at the point that I see that I really need help. And I'm just like, okay, like maybe like a little bit of humility. And it's like a way of saying like, please like help me. Like, and then with this all being said, I'm also curious on the point of seeing the deity in everyone's heart. Because it can be easy to like go to a temple and like pray and like see something really beautiful and divine, but really seeing the form in other people's hearts. I don't know if there's any comments or stories you have on that.
Thank you,
Thanks for sharing. Maybe Syamapriya or Anandini, would you like to?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to just respond. Thank you, Bhakta Nico. Yes, I appreciate like your sharing about your upbringing, and I can relate. I was brought up in a Muslim background, and it was really hard for me at the beginning of like, what's the thing of bowing down? You don't bow down to anybody but God, and definitely not in an idol form. So there's a lot of shift and a lot of growth and a lot of beauty in this tradition, the Bhakti tradition, and so I can relate, and I appreciate you sharing your personal aspect there. And I hear you about, like I said, the humility, like asking for humility, and humility is actually one of the main qualities that Srila Gopal Bhatta is known by, is his level of humility. So like you're saying, it's like praying for more humility to be able to see and worship and relate to God through the form of a deity, whether it's whichever specific deity form. And then I hear you asking about like, yes, and then there's the other part of like, yes, praying for and connecting with the form of God, who's within all our hearts. And so there's the external and then the internal. I'm curious to hear from you of what does that mean to you when you say connect inwards to praying to the form of Krishna inside your heart. I'm sure you've had some experience, even if it's little, in your own way. I'm just curious what's.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. You're asking about my own personal experience of connecting with Krishna in my heart, or my personal experience of seeing Krishna in others' hearts?
Both.
Both.
Whichever one you want to share.
I feel like my question and comment was more towards the second part, and like really like looking at everyone as like a child of God or as part and parcel of God. And there's just deep reverence and respect to show to one another. And one thing that like maybe I feel like called to share is like this idea of like no force. Because with force there's no love. So really like, I mean, the end of the Gita, when Krishna's like, okay, this is the truth, now do as you like. It's showing this is like unconditional divine like parental love. So yeah, like it's really helped me with my approach to relationships, where it's like everything is kind of an invitation. Like it's never you should do this. It's always like hey, like you're invited. Like, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Thank you for asking.
So it's that place of the guidance to the more we can see Krishna and the divine in each person's heart and in each person, then everything is Krishna. And so for you, then it's that place of, then there's more compassion, there's more space for you to relate with the truth of that person in a way that's compassionate and loving, and feeling that there's no, like Krishna is not forcing, it's like do as you wish. And so that moves you to receive more guidance and more fluidity, if that's just my word, but that's the sense of as you're speaking. So if Anandini had anything to say, I was just, Dear Govinda, I'm not.
I'm just saying this whole, this transformative communication, it's all about this discussion, like all, whether coach training, coaching seminars, and all the skills, all the principles, all the techniques are for supporting people to connect. We sometimes use the word to connect with the highest guidance within, to connect with super consciousness, really to connect with super soul, God in the heart, Krishna in the heart, whatever terms we want to use. And so in one sense, like what we're going to be effective and potent in facilitation and coaching or in listening, to the extent that we're realizing God in the heart of all living entities. So Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Rideshara Junatishtati. So there are three aspects of realizing the absolute. There's the oneness, and then you might say an intermediate aspect is God in the heart of all living entities, God in every atom, Adantarasta, Pramochantarasta. And they may say the most comprehensive aspect is Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. You might say the personal deity. So so it's everything we're doing is like about supporting each other to connect with Krishna in the heart. So we said, well, but I'm not realizing Krishna in the heart. So one maybe it's a crude metaphor, but it comes to me, it's just like, okay, so well, we can start by even intellectually, philosophically understanding like how that makes sense, and we're not going through all of like the logical expositions here, but yeah, just like, so we hear, we get exposed. Okay, just let's say if I see let's say if I see a car a block away, and it's this white Toyota Camry, and it's driving, and in front there's this black front cover. So I might say, oh, there's Marie. I might say, there's Marie. Okay. So now I'm not actually seeing Marie. But like, oh, that's the car. So I know the driver inside the car. I know there's a driver inside the car. So okay, there's a moving body. So there must be a soul. And there must be a super soul. So even we can get trained to begin to see through the eyes of knowledge, and to not see with material eyes. It can sound mystical, but in a sense, we're doing that all the time. Another analogy, Just like, let's say if there's a 2-year-old child, a 2-year-old child sees the sun as a circle in the sky 2 or 3 inches in diameter, right? Well, when we see the sun, when we see the sun, we don't see a circle in the sky 3 inches diameter. We see, no, this is a stellar body, 1.4 million times greater in volume than the Earth planet. Okay, because we're seeing through the eyes of knowledge. In this, it's like scientific knowledge in this case. We're seeing through the eyes of knowledge. So we say, no, that's not just a circle in the sky. But with these material eyes, we're just seeing a circle in the sky, but we're seeing with the eyes of knowledge. So similarly, as we like read Prabhupada's books and we chant Hare Krishna, and we come to Mangalarti, and we follow this program, this powerful program of Bhakti Yoga, and including sharpening our spiritual intelligence by studying the philosophy, then more and more we're seeing the soul. We're not seeing the body. We're not seeing the body as the person. We're saying, oh, the body's animated because the soul's inside. And the source of the soul, the very life of the soul, that's the super soul, that's Krishna within the heart. So we begin to see that. Now, we might not be at the point where, like, I'm actually so much realizing with spiritual eyes, Krishna in the heart and the Shama Sundar form, Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Srupam Govinda Mari Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. That it's described in that verse, Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanina Shanta Sadaiva Vidayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunasvarupam Govinda Mari Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. Lord Brahma sings, I worship Govinda, the primary, the Lord, the first progenitor, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, possessed of innumerable transcendental attributes, in whom the pure devotees see in the heart of their heart, with the eyes of love, tinged with the salve of devotional love. Okay. But we begin to relate, we begin to realize the soul and the super soul inside the body, the more we give ourselves to this process. In the same way that, as we grow up, we learn a little science, we begin to see, oh, that's actually this huge stellar body. It's not just a circle. So the more we practice the process, and it's a very exciting question, because the more like we're actually realizing ourselves as spirit soul, all living entities as spirit soul with Krishna in their heart, then the less and less there's room for just petty concerns and quarrels and things like that. Then it's just then life becomes more and more a true thrill at every moment, and relationships and opportunity to support each other, to connect with super soul in the heart. Thank you.
Ru, this is Gajendra. May I speak to Nico's comment?
Yes, please.
So first, I just want to say Hare Krishna to Nico, Gajendra, who we did some kirtan together. I was the guitar player a couple of weeks ago.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. As I heard your what you said, I really appreciated it, and how it stimulated me was I was remembering a couple things. One is there's like a verse in the Bhagavad Gita where it's expressing that the self-realized sage, he's seeing Krishna in the heart of every living being, even whether it's a cow or a dog eater. And I'm also pondering this idea of what it is all about in relation to God. It is about experiencing love. I feel if we want to love God fully and completely, how do we leave out the parts and parcels of God, which are the other people? And where your question also took me was to consider sort of the different levels of devotees. There's these sort of three main categories as it's analyzed, called Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama adhikaris. The adhikari is, I believe, like a stage of realization. And the Kanishta, one of the traits is they only see God in the temple. Like for them to see God, they go to the temple and they look at the deity form, and that's God. But at the higher stages of Madhyama and Uttama, they begin to realize, oh, God is not just in the temple, or in our relationship. Our vision of God is more than just what's in the temple. And I will mention that the mood or the realization, the essential vision of the Uttama adhikar is he sees God everywhere and everything. He only sees God. And if I don't know if Dear Govinda wants to correct or add to anything.
Thank you, Gajendra Guru. I appreciate you bringing in that construct that Prabhupada references so much. So yeah, like actually a very advanced Uttama Adhikari like Gopal Bhatta Goswami or Srila Prabhupada, they have no need to worship the deity. And I appreciate what you said a few moments ago, Bhakta Nico. You said, I need help. So Prabhupada gave us altar deity worship to help purify us, to give us something to focus on. Otherwise, we're going to focus on other forms that won't be helpful for our spiritual life. And now, when I said they have no need to worship the deity, but out of ecstatic, joyful inspiration, out of service, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, they do serve and worship the deity. But as Gajendra Prabhu nicely expressed, they're seeing God in every atom. They're realizing God in the heart of all living entities, so they don't need to go to the temple or like that, because like the temple's everywhere, and I mean, it's there for us too, but we tend to not realize it. So that's why in our homes, let's have a special room for the altar like that. Yeah, I see Anasuya Devi Dasi's here. When it said several years ago, remember in her home, she transformed the master bedroom to the master's room. So the master bedroom became the main room for the deities, for Srila Prabhupada and like that. So that's the spirit, to turn our house into a temple. Yeah. And then like for Gopal Bhatta Goswami or Srila Prabhupada, it's their service to establish deity worship for the benefit of conditioned souls who want to progress in this process. Thank you, Gajendra. I appreciate what you're bringing to the conversation. Dr. Keith?
Hey, yeah, I appreciate the deity worship in the sense that I'm interested in the way that different processes affect and purify consciousness. And the deity process is really interesting like that, is that you have, you're offering where the intention is to engage our psychophysical nature in the act of worship. And so the body is made out of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and the deity worship engages all of them. You have the flower, it engages sense of smell, fire, wind, you wave the chamara, and sense of touch and all that. So it's a really interesting way of engaging the senses in the act. There's a lot of details in it. So that's the way you're engaging your mind and intelligence. And I've never really done deity worship. I'm kind of like one of the neophyte people he was mentioning, but I did the Prabhupada more arty anyway, and I found that was purifying. It was an interesting experience in the sense that I was like, you engage your physical body in an action, and you don't you know that you're not going to get any material like reciprocation from it. So I noticed it's just in the act of it, it's like a selfless act, you know, and I appreciated that. There's something else I was going to say, but I can't remember right now. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Keith, for sharing. It brings out like the completeness of, or gives me an idea of the completeness of deity worship. And yeah, I want to share a few things that stood out for me, Syamapriya, when you were reading the story of Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and many things. Actually, I am Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami for me was like, who is this person? And I read a lot these past days and meditated on Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and I'm still in this place. Who is this person? And still, like I got some, just a few things that really touched my heart, and especially this, that when he was 7 years old and Lord Chaitanya was in his house, that he cried when Lord Chaitanya left, and Lord Chaitanya decided to stay a few more days. And that reminded me of a class, Dear Govinda, you gave some weeks ago, I think, and you started paraphrasing the goal of our practice is to come to the place that God becomes our servant. And then, of course, it's not about like telling God, give me a car or give me a nice house or whatever. It comes from a place of love and devotion. And for me, this is an example, like Chaitanya, Krishna, God became, he changed his plan to please Gopala Bhatta Goswami, a little boy. So that really moved me. And also to see that he was 7 years old and he was just spontaneously in love with Lord Chaitanya. And then another thing that his life mission is like based on an instruction he got through a dream. So who of us has a dream? Like, okay, so it wasn't me. It's described also as a spiritual vision, where we adjust all our whole life to follow what we heard or what we received in this dream, in this vision. And Gopala Bhatta Goswami, and that's another thing I really love about the Goswamis, is that I get insight, like they lived a normal life. Like Gopala Bhatta Goswami, he was taking care of his parents, and that was his instruction, to stay with his parents until they left their bodies and then go to Vrindavan. And then one more thing, like recently my daughter read a book about the beginning of 20th century. There was a race between Scott and Amundsen, who will get to the South Pole first. And this book is like written based on the journals of these adventurers, and they went through so much pain and suffering just to get to the South Pole. And Scott's team, they didn't, no one survived. They all died, and a terrible death, freezing in the cold. And we discussed, like, why did they do that? Why did they do that? And they did it because they wanted fame and recognition. So they went through all this like big pain. And I can look at my life, how many things I do or don't do because I'm concerned. What will others think? Will they appreciate me for it or not? Will they like me or not? And here's Gopala Bhatta Goswami, who has the potential to like create an earthquake in our consciousness, like to really break up this idea that we're in control of everything and the money will make me happy, or whatever the conception is. So he has that potential to really create this earthquake where underneath we get an insight or a remembrance that actually we're part of God, and what makes us truly happy is to serve God. And he doesn't want to be mentioned. Yeah.
And we are speaking about him 500 years later.
Yes. Yeah. So time is already up, and I appreciate very much all the sharings, the discussion, to spend time like immersed in who is Gopal Bhatta Goswami and appreciating his teachings, his example, his legacy. Syamapriya, did you want to add something? Say something?
No, you summed it up really lovely. Thank you. Yeah,
So-
just appreciating everybody here.
Krishna Das Kaviraj could not help but glorify him. Yes. So Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Syamapriya and Anandini.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hari Bol.